We're gonna wait a few more minutes for everyone to.
Sure.
Hi, Catherine. Good evening.
Good evening, teacher.
Hi, Danny. Good evening. Hope you guys are having a buen inicio de semana. Good Monday. Starting off strong, I hope. One or two more minutes until everyone logs in.
Hi everyone.
Hi, guys. Hi, Oshin. Good evening.
Hi.
Okay, I think we can start. There are plenty of us. So I owed you guys the speaking 4 class, which we didn't get to do last time because of my connection problems. So we're gonna do that today. So since you saw the class maybe like a while back, does anyone want to recall what exactly this type of question consists of? The 4th type of speaking question, the 4th speaking task. What do you remember about this type of question? ¿Qué les han dicho en clases? It's also integrated. That means you have to listen. In this case, it's just listening. Remember in the last ones, we had both text and a conversation we had to listen to. In this case, it's just listening. We're going to listen to an academic lecture. And this task consists of making a summary, kind of the lecture we're going to listen to, okay? Just like in the other integrated speaking tasks, we have, I think it's 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds, so un minuto igual que las demás, to give your answer. Okay, do you remember that? ¿Todo claro sobre eso? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do some of them, and I'm gonna give you guys the pointers as we go along. Okay, so the instruction they're going to give you is you will now listen to part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about it. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Okay, so we have a little bit less time, but it's also just one source material, right? It's not a writing and a listening, just one listening. And they're kind of short. They're unos 3 minutos, 4 minutos. But I'm going to give you guys a heads up. They're a little more complicated because it's, it's a formal context. It's academic text. Sometimes it's a little bit heavy to digest. Es un poco difícil cacharlo. So hay que prestar mucha atención a eso. Okay, so vamos a escuchar el lecture. Igual, siempre con su papelito para ir anotando y haciendo sus ideas. In these cases, in the previous speakings, they asked kind of an opinion or an interpretation of your own. In this case, they're just going to ask you to summarize. So it's important overall to listen to the main points. No se preocupen tanto porque van a tener que interpretar algo. No, it's just a summary. So incluso mientras están escuchando, ya pueden ir pensando, ya apunto esto es importante, esto me voy a anotar, esto lo voy a mencionar al momento de dar mi resumencito. Okay, so eso, again, as always, pay attention to where they put the emphasis in words, pay attention to when they introduce, main ideas, para ir anotando eso. Okay? So let's go ahead and listen to the lecture.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a literature class.
In the 8th century BCE, a legendary author named Homer wrote 2 epic poems. You probably know them already, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're fascinating poems, really, partly because they give us such a clear window to the culture of the time. But what culture or what period of Greek history was Homer describing? His own era or an earlier one? It's an interesting question, but it's very likely there's no real answer. You see, Homer was working in the oral tradition. Before he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey down, poems were told and retold by generations of storytellers. Each generation added details to the poems, so it's likely that these poems are actually this. They're an interesting mixture of historical details about a bunch of different time periods. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here's one. Homer describes helmets made out of boar tusks. Well, just these kinds of helmets have actually been discovered in sites dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE in Greece. They weren't used in later time periods. That's a pretty clear indication, right? So clearly Homer's poems preserved some authentic details about the distant past, and some would argue that's the era Homer intended to write about. But then we take a look at another detail and it's a bit more nebulous. Homer describes chariots, horse-drawn wagons carrying warriors into battle. He describes them as simply carrying troops on and off the battlefield. That might be how chariots were used in Homer's time, sure, but in earlier history, the time when those helmets might have been used, say, they were used in battles themselves, the chariots, that is. So this is a good example of Homer adding details from his own world into the poems.
Using points and examples
Before we listen to the question, is there any questions about the listening? ¿Qué tal lo han sentido? ¿Han entendido todo? ¿Ha estado un poco muy difícil? ¿Alguna idea que les haya quedado suelta? What do you guys think?
En
¿No?
mi caso, yo creo que entiendo bastante, pero fueron algunos detalles específicos los que se me escaparon, más que todas las fechas.
Yeah, when we're dealing with these, a lot of times if they're like really difficult subjects like physics or biology, or bueno, cualquier cosa que no es de tu área, for me, if they give me a physics or biology topic, I have no idea what they're talking about. It's try to latch on to the general knowledge, el conocimiento popular, I guess. So the things you know about with certainty. So maybe you miss the details, but as long as you have the solid information, okay, we're talking about Homer, we're talking about poetry, we're talking about the Iliad, todo eso que ya tienes de conocimiento general, ¿no? Quién es Homero y todo, you can use that to fortificar los puntos que sientes que te faltan. Okay, importante igual más que nombrecitos y fecha, más que fechas or things like that, the names, the ideas, those are more important to go writing down. Okay, so ahora sí vamos a escuchar la pregunta. And you guys are going to have 20 seconds to prepare. Ready? Here's the question.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain why the professor thinks there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described.
Okay, is the question clear? Here's the question también, aquí la tienen. Y your 20 seconds start now. Okay, who feels ready to give their response?
I'd like to.
Okay. All right, David, go ahead. Your 60 seconds start now.
The lecture is about Homer, one of the most important poets in history. Homer is a writer from ancient Greece from 8th century BC. He wrote many famous poems like the Iliad or the Odyssey, but it is very likely that he was indeed describing an earlier era instead of his own. An example of this is Homer's description of helmets used in battle, due to the fact that the helmets described were made of boar tusks that were not longer used in Homer's era, but in an earlier age. But it is also probable that Homer added details from his own era, like the use of chariots, used in Homer's era too.
All right. You went off a little on the time, maybe like 5 or 6 seconds. What do you feel could have been a little shorter to calcular mejor el tiempo?
Sure, because I couldn't see the chronometer.
Yeah, sorry for that, guys. Pero bueno, I think you structured it very well. You know, the points you made, all the information was there. The examples were mentioned. Yeah, and also, like I said, basing it off your own knowledge that Homer was a poet, I think it was pretty complete. It's just a little matter of the time. Maybe in the introduction, cutting a little bit short, you know, that detail about Homer being a very important poet. Or podríamos resumir también in his poetry, en vez de mencionar necesariamente the Iliad and the Odyssey. Da, da, da. But other than that, perfectly structured. Good answer.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to try? Girls. Corina, want to try?
Okay, I will try.
All right. So your 60 seconds start now.
The lecture starts by introducing some Homer poetry, like the Iliad. After that, the professor starts to talk about the period of time in which this could have been written, and he says that Homer gives some clues. For example, he stated that Homer describes some helmets that are from the 2nd millennium BC, but in the other hand, he describes other characteristics that are from another time in history. So this is why he believes that there is no way to know exactly what period in time is Homer describing.
All right. How do you feel with your answer?
I feel that the second example was like too general because I really didn't I couldn't write it, but I just had like to summarize that was other thing that make the people think that it wasn't the same era, but yes, I think I couldn't talk specifically of what the professor said.
Yeah, that was what I was going to mention. The question asks for points and examples from the talk. So es necesario que menciones, ¿no? Esto de los cuernitos, de los cascos con cuernitos y los chariots. A way to maybe summarize or make a stronger statement in the introduction, because you did mention what it talks about. You did mention, the topic of everything. But maybe a more generalized statement, like, we're not sure what era he's referring to because he uses elements from different time periods. No, esa oración creo que resume bastante claro el por qué, ¿no? Responde la pregunta. Usa elementos de diferentes tiempos. And then you can, with more calm, with más tranquila, más con calma, mention each of the examples. Now, this thing he uses was from a period much before Homer, but then this thing he uses was from his period. So he introduced elements from his reality into his poetry. Y da, 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 da. Mencionar, cuando te pide que menciones los ejemplos, es importante ponerlos ahí.
Yes, I didn't mention the second example because at that time someone opened the door and I couldn't really listen. So in order to not be like left that without mentioning, I just said other things that weren't from that era.
Yeah, no, es medio complicado en clases virtuales. But despite that little setback, pretty good. I like it. ¿Qué más iba a decir? Una cosa más. En este caso, you guys no les faltó tiempo, o sea, no les sobró tiempo, pero en general igual para rellenar a veces tiempo y también para que suene un poco más estructurada su respuesta. It's always important to use reporting verbs, no citar el lecture. So we can say the professor claims that, the professor states that, the professor mentions that, no, todas esas palabritas, mentions, says, claims, da, 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 references the listening. Let's do one more with this one. Anyone else want to give their response? Daniela, maybe you?
I wasn't able to listen because my mom walked through my...
Okay. Yeah, don't worry. So Catherine, maybe? Kate?
Maybe can I try the next one, please, teacher? I don't really like history, and I didn't take good notes.
All right.
I don't like history.
Me pasa al revés. I think you study medicine, right? And when they give me, sí, a mí me gustan más bien estos because I like sociology and culture and history. So al revés. All right, so Oshin, ¿quieres probar este antes de que we move on to the next one?
No, I understand a little bit the lecture because I was with bad connection.
All right. Yeah, I know you guys. Digital classes is maybe not the best thing in the world, pero ay, tiempos de COVID, what can we do? Okay, so same thing. You listen to the task, or you listen to the lecture, and you have 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. So let's listen to this one.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a physics class.
Uy, qué divertido.
Have any of you wondered how exactly planes are able to fly even though they're so much heavier than air? There are actually a couple of ways we can answer that. The first way, the easier way, I think, is based on Newton's third law. That law says that when you push something, there is push back. So think about a wing. It's slanted up, right? The front of the wing is higher than the back. And as the plane moves through the air, that air goes under the wing. It gets pushed down by the slant. And when that air is pushed down, as we said, it has to push back. It pushes up. So there's a lot of air getting pushed down by that angle of the wing. And it's all pushing back up, pushing the plane into the air. The second answer has to do with something called Bernoulli's principle, which is about how fluids work. And when I say fluids, that includes gases too, not just liquids. This principle, it says that as the speed of a fluid, in this case air, as the speed of the air decreases, pressure increases. And also as speed goes up, pressure goes down. So in other words, the faster the air is moving, the less the pressure. The slower it is moving, the more the pressure. Get it? Speed and pressure are opposite. They're inversely correlated. We won't worry too much about how this works, but just know that because the way a wing is designed, air moves faster on the top of the wing than on the bottom of the wing. So that means the air on top, where the air is moving fast, has low pressure, and the air on the bottom of the wing, where the air is moving slowly, has high pressure. The difference in pressure pushes the wing upward into the sky.
Using points and examples from
Okay,
the
before
lecture, summarize.
Before we listen to the question, how did you feel this one? ¿Qué tal? ¿Todo claro? Any questions? Yeah, this one was good. Really? This was the one I have most trouble with.
This is the first time I hear one about physics.
This is your area. You're preparado.
Well, I'm in the electricity field, so this is more like Danny's area.
It's similar. You know, it's physics, ciencias exactas. Aquí
Yeah.
acabo de entrar, I think. All right. Okay, so any questions? ¿O hay algo que no les haya quedado claro? ¿Hay algo que sienten que información esencial, si sienten que les falta así un trozo grande de información de que pucha no puedo responder, that's important, but other than that tienen que intentar llenar los huequitos que tal vez les hayan faltado. Pero is there like a big hole of information, algo que no, todo claro? Okay. So now we're going to listen to the question, and you have 20 seconds to prepare your answer. All right, the question is.
High. Moving slowly has high pressure. The difference in pressure pushes the wing.
Using points and examples from the lecture, summarize the two explanations of how planes are able to fly.
Okay, so there's a question, and your 20 seconds start now. Okay, who wants to give their answer? Voluntarios.
I could try.
All right. Okay, so your 60 seconds start now.
The lecture is about how planes are able to fly. After introducing the topic, the professor explains the reasons. The first one refers to the Newton's third law. This law states that when a force There is, when a force is applied, there is a reaction force. For example, when the wind is applied to the wings, there is a reaction force to this wind. Then the professor explains also the Bernoulli principle. This principle states that when the velocity of air is lower, the pressure is higher and vice versa. So this is why a wind can have thrust on the air, because how it is designed, in the upper part of the wind, the velocity is high and the pressure is lower. And in the down part of the wing, the velocity is low, but the pressure is higher, making the plane fly.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful response. Excellent response. It sounded like you ya tenías todo preparado. Very well structured, excelente retención de información también.
Yeah, it's kind of what I see in my classes. So.
Yeah, exactly. See, when it's something you know, te agarro de lo que sabes. En caso de que no sepas de física, at least you know más o menos de qué va Newton's third law, ¿no? Entonces, agarrarse de ese conocimiento general, ¿no? Si no te acuerdas exactamente que dijo, okay, I kind of know how Newton's third law works, so you can explain it like that. But in your case, ¿cómo es tu área? No, excelente. No, wonderful, wonderfully structured, todo. You had an advantage porque es tu área, but would you tell us a bit how you structured it? ¿Cómo ha sido tus 20 segundos de cómo armó todo esto?
When I take notes, I write a topic and a number 1 and a number 2. So I always write a first example and some notes, and then the second example and some notes. I usually use drawing because that helps me. So I don't write a pressure or anything. I draw a wing and I draw arrows and letters.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, like I said, guys, mapas conceptuales, simbolitos, les salvan la vida. Good job, Dani. Who else? ¿Alguien más quiere probar con esta?
I
David?
like to.
All right. So your 60 seconds start now.
The lecture is about how planes are able to fly. The professor mentions 2 fundamental principles. The first one is Newton's third law. The third law states that when there is a force, there's always a reaction in the opposite way with the exact same amount of force. When air is pushed down by the plane's weight, there is the same amount of force pushing the same plane up. The second reason is Bernoulli's principle. According to this principle, whenever the speed of the wind decreases, the pressure increases. The pressure is different at the front of the wind than, oh man.
All right, continue your response. Concluye tu idea.
The pressure is different at the front of the wing than it is at the back. So speed and pressure are opposites. And this difference of pressure allows the plane to fly.
All right, perfect. Igual, lo mismo, very well structured. All the information is there. The examples are clearly separated. A little bit, I think it's the velocity of speaking. No, igual we have to kind of measure if we're speaking maybe too fast, because sometimes we get really nervous and then we're like, y nos sobra un montón de tiempo. Or sometimes we can get stuck, or por cualquier cosa, or we talk a little bit slower, so we don't manage to get all our ideas. I think it's the structure mostly. O sea, la estructura está bien. Yo creo que es un poco más el timing, trying to manage la velocidad a la que hablas. But other than that, perfectly structured response.
Thank you.
One more of these. Who wants to do this one?
I can try.
All right. So your 60 seconds start now.
In this physics class, the topic of how airplanes can fly is discussed, and they mentioned that there are two main ways. The first is related to Newton's third law, which says that when you push something backwards, and the second way is that is related to Bernoulli's principle, which indicates as fluids the relationships between velocity and pressure, and mention that the lower the speed on the fluid, the no.
What was your idea? ¿Qué querías? ¿Qué querías?
Quería decir lo que explicó de que a mayor presión, menor velocidad y eso, y me confundí.
Yeah, maybe the nerves a little. I kind of felt you got a little nervous. How do you feel with your answer?
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Sí, it was igual, la misma información estaba ahí, estaba presente. I also like how you started off the introduction really well. I feel though the first one faltaba un poco de ejemplos. You know, mentioning the shape of the wing, something that Daniela summarized really well. En ambas ideas se habla de que la forma de la alita is kind of what helps it fly, right? So mentioning that detail, no, the way the wings are designed is helps the plane fly por la ley de Newton, por la presión del coso sobre the wing. So that little sentence, I think, igual ayuda a cerrar o a presentar la idea, o lo ponen ahí al principio, or maybe at the end, para entender un poco mejor. Sí, pero other than, you know, adding a little example de la construcción de la alita en el primer ejemplo, good, igual, good structure. Y es un poco el tiempo de los nervios, igual que it happens. All right. And let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we're going to listen to another one. And here we go.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a sociology class. Let's consider the way sociologists use the terms culture and society. A society is a distinct group of people. A sociologist would say that people in a society are defined by their social interactions and the culture they share. Meanwhile, culture itself can be defined as that society's shared knowledge, beliefs, and expectations. Often people think of a society as something really, well, big. And sure, that's true. An entire nation, for example, will generally have some common thread of culture that defines it. The most obvious example is that citizens of one region generally speak a common language. But think about behavioral standards too. Like what's considered polite or impolite. Whereas in one country, you might be expected to take off your shoes as the guest in another's home. In other countries, that might be considered strange. Cultural traits like that can extend over enormous populations. But a society can also be much smaller, much simpler. Take this class. Aren't we a society? We have social interactions with each other every week. And I think it's fair to say we have a culture of a sort too. Think back to what happened on the second day of class. Do you all remember? I'd missed my train and didn't have any way to let you all know that I'd be late. But in contrast to other classes, where students might have just headed home 15 minutes after the planned start time, each and every one of you waited the full 30 minutes it took me to arrive. That kind of set expectations, right? It laid the foundation for a culture of patience, something I think is still true of this particular group, this little society. Using points and examples.
Bueno, okay. Before we listen to the question, any questions? ¿Algún vacío de información que les haya quedado? Do you have everything you need to answer? Everything good? Okay, so ahora sí, we're going to listen to the question. And you're going to have 20 seconds to prepare. The question is,
using points and examples from the lecture, explain how a society can be a large group of people or a very small group.
okay, so explain why a society is a large group or a small group. Your 20 seconds start now. All right. Okay, who wants to give their answer?
May I try?
All right. All right, your 60 seconds start now.
The lecture is about culture and society. The professor uses two examples for each one. First of all, society. The professor says that society is a large group of people, but they are distinct. The professor says that culture, after all, is our beliefs, expectations that people share. For example, citizens in a country share a common language. Also, the citizens says what is polite or impolite, but in other countries, in other cultures, it can be strange. In society, for example, a class can be considered like a society. They have social interactions, and those are the two examples of culture and society.
Okay. All right. How do you feel with your response?
It was disorganized.
Why do you say it was disorganized? Okay, que en tus apuntes al momento de leerlo, ¿qué se sintió desorganizado?
Al momento de hablar, porque he tomado apuntes primero de cultura y después de sociedad y, o sea, está desordenados mis apuntes.
Yeah, it's kind of more of a habit. Eso es cosa de hábito, aprender a leer tus propios garabatos rápido y entender qué está sucediendo ahí.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just practice. That's a matter of practice. Pero a big important thing is that it is, o sea, sí nos van a pedir un resumen siempre, pero también hay que prestar mucha atención a lo que pide la pregunta. In this case, it's asking how both a large group and a small group can be considered a society. So we have to try to answer that first and then give the examples. In this case, explaining what culture is doesn't really fully benefit the answer. Now we can just briefly mention a society is defined because it shares a common culture. Culture can be common beliefs, expectations, da, da, da. Entonces, en one sentence, ya está claro lo que es culture. Then, el peso de la respuesta debería estar en esos dos ejemplos que da. A big society can be like a country. And he mentions Japanese culture. You can briefly describe Japanese culture. You know, everyone in this country takes their shoes off when entering someone's home. But a society can also be a small group, y ahí menciona lo de la clase, ¿no? Que su clase tiene también una cultura, porque es una pequeña sociedad. So el peso, the bulk of the answer should be in that, in giving those two examples. Big society and little society. Big group, small group.
Okay, teacher, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Good answer. Igual, retención de información, súper clara, estaba toda la info, solo que un poco más enfocar en eso de la diferencia de grupos. Anyone else want to try this one?
Can I try?
All right. Vamos, Corina. I'm going to give you your 60 seconds. And they start now.
The lecture is about society and culture. The professor explains that society is a group of people that interact together and share the same culture. He mentions first the example of a large society, mentioning people in one region that share a common language and also share the idea of what is polite and what is not. But he also mentions that a society can be a smaller group. For instance, he mentions the classroom. He says that they share the culture of waiting until the professor comes to the class, unlike other groups. And that's why he says that they are a society.
All right. How do you feel with your response?
I felt a little nervous, but I think I could mention the two examples.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice you were nervous. No se te notó nerviosa. And a perfect structure, ¿no? Justo eso que les decía, you answered the question very, very well. You gave the examples, perfectly structured answer. I really don't think que no hay nada para criticar. Excellent. All right, and I also otro diferente de estos. One more. Let's try a different one. Vamos con el siguiente. Okay. Último, creo que vamos a ver hoy día. All right, so here we go. Ready to listen and
Now, listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. Let's talk about two kinds of biological selection. Two different ways that traits are selected in a species of animal as it breeds and reproduces. First, there's natural selection. Here, living things develop features that help them survive in a certain kind of climate, escape from a certain kind of predator, that sort of thing. In contrast, we have artificial selection. Artificial selection happens outside of what we'd call nature. It happens when people deliberately breed living things for their own use. Now, it's true that natural selection and artificial selection both give a living thing the traits it needs to reproduce and survive. But these two types of biological selection also have very different effects, obviously. Maybe one of the easiest places to see this difference is with wolves and dogs. Let's start with wolves. So, what's a wolf's job? It's to survive in the wild and get enough to eat, right? So certain qualities are naturally selected. Wolves need keen senses so they can detect prey. They need to be fast, strong, and aggressive to catch their prey and to survive even in the harshest weather. Wolves that are born with these qualities live longer and pass the qualities on to their pups. That's natural selection. But a dog's job, its role in its environment, is a little different. Dogs don't need to survive in the wild. They need human protection. So to survive, a breed of dog needs to have traits that humans want. Take the golden retriever. People bred a dog big enough to be a good hunter, but not so big that it was hard to control. And it had to be obedient, unlike a wolf, right? A golden retriever has to be, well, friendly in order to be well-liked enough that we humans decide to breed it. So we can get similarly friendly puppies, more pets. Using points and examples.
Okay, before we hear the question, any big questions you have? Any information that wasn't clear? Anything that prevents you from giving a complete answer? O todo claro, entendido y No? Okay, I think it's clear for everyone. All right, ahora sí la pregunta. Escuchemos.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of biological selection.
All right, and your 20 seconds start now. All right, who wants to go? Who wants to give their answer?
I like to.
All right. Espera, igual veamos para que esté ahí en pantalla la preguntita. Dame 2 segundos. There it is. Okay, so ready, David? Your 60 seconds start now.
This is a biology class about biological selection. There are two kinds of biological selection: natural selection and artificial selection. Natural selection occurs when the most able individuals survive, the ones that can get enough food, or the ones that can avoid predators. On the other hand, artificial selection occurs when people deliberately select the individuals that have the most likable features. The professor explained this by using wolves. Wolves need to be aggressive and with keen senses in order to survive in the wild. So individuals with these traits are more likely to survive. But dogs,
Dale, finish your idea.
But dogs, like in the case of golden retriever, need to be obedient or friendly in order to be kept by humans.
All right, perfect. Y solo te has pasado por unos 5 seconds. Yeah, I feel the introduction, mentioning the two cases, complete, perfect structure. Igual me gustó que primero mencionaras las dos cosas and then you gave your 2 examples. But yeah, the structure was perfect. A little bit el tiempo del final, maybe more briefly mentioning the part about the wolves. Like como ya habías dejado en claro qué es la diferencia between natural and artificial selection. Just briefly, okay, wolves por esto and dogs, but everything else was perfect. Great answer. All right, anyone else?
Thank you, that's because I can't see the timer.
I know, I'm sorry, guys. It's my internet and timer, and sorry. Anyone else want to try this one?
May I try?
Catherine? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, dale. For 60 seconds, start now.
The lecture is about biological selection. The professor says that there are two types of biological selection. The first one is natural selection, where the strongest survive. The professor gives the example of wolves, and they need to survive in the wild, so they detect the prey, and that's the way they survive. The second example of that the professor gives of biological selection is artificial selection, where the human is involved. For instance, dogs need human protection. So like golden retriever, is the human behavior is involved in them. That's why they need to be obedient and friendly. Those are the examples of the professor gives of biological selection.
Okay, good, perfect timing. A little bit the ideas though. You gave clear examples in both parts. The introduction was perfect, ¿no? La introducción perfecta, igual el tiempo, más o menos 15 segundos de mencionar la introducción. That was perfect. I feel though some keywords might have been missing to really understand de qué va cada una. For example, you did mention the examples of dogs being selected to be friendlier, dogs being selected to be a certain size. Pero ahí está la clave. I think the key word here was to select. Humans select what characteristics they want to reproduce. And that's the main difference. So ahí la palabrita select, ¿no? Si mencionabas que los humanos seleccionan, se tendría mucho más claro esa idea. And the first one, also the fact that natural selection is to help the strongest survive. Esa ideita creo que igual stating that a little bit clearer, and it was a lot better. Pero yeah, I think the ideas were very clear. The examples were all there, present. So good answer.
Thank you.
One more of these. Último de estos.
I can try.
Espera, ¿dónde estás? No te veo. Oshin, all right. Your 60 seconds start now.
Okay. The professor of the biology class mentioned that there are two ways of biological selection, one natural and the other artificial. It's occur outside of nature. And to illustrate what he mentioned, the teacher said that, for example, a wolf and a dog, and wolf has need to be strong and aggressive and need to survive. This is natural selection, but while the dog doesn't need to survive because
¿Qué idea querías decir? What was your...
que él no necesita protección, no necesita sobrevivir porque está bajo la protección humana y su comportamiento es distinto.
All right. Up to hasta que se te corta el tiempo, igual, perfect structure. The introduction was very clear. A little bit, una cosita de the phrases, I think something would have been better phrased. I think you said, he says, or he says the example of a wolf and a dog, right? Pero una frase un poco más natural y más completa might have been, he uses the example of a wolf and a dog. Y ahí continuabas con el resto de tu respuesta, que tenía toda la información, los ejemplos claros. And yeah, I think it was good.
Thank you.
Esa frasecita. And yeah, you guys, I think that's it for today's class. So we're going to leave it there. I don't know if you guys have any questions about this type of question or about the class in general, any comments? Everything clear? Everything? Okay, so all right, guys, I'm going to send you the poll. Espera un ratito. All right, so there's a poll, you guys. Ya saben, llenan el poll y pueden salirse de clase. So I hope you have a nice week, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Have a nice
Bye.
week.
Bye.
See you guys.